Today in r/malicious compliance. Shame me with lunch detention. Had forgotten about this story until the other day when I was chatting with a friend I went to high school with. It's silly, but I think it fits. E tilde at the end. It was the late 90s. I was still wearing too much flannel and continuing my historical trend of keeping books from the library much too long. I had a paper due for my sophomore global studies class, so I naturally took out more books than I could read, wrote the essay, and completely forgot the books piled in the corner of my bedroom. After a series of overdue slips sent to my homeroom, I eventually did return the 4 or 5 book. One sunny afternoon in the anonymous drop book during a study period, promptly moved on to bigger and better things. About 2 weeks later, I was called down to the assistant principal's office in that space of time. Before classes officially started, that was reserved for one thing and one thing only. The reprobates and delinquents were in trouble. I walked the halls thinking that surely this was just a timing mishap, and I was being summoned to receive congratulations for some kind of award I didn't know I had entered into competition for. Yup, he just wants to prepare me for the surprise ticker tape parade. I was wholly unprepared to hear that I was receiving lunch detention, to start immediately, because I had not returned a single book that I still remember was slim and had a white and red cover. From my paper research, I tried to argue that there was a mistake, since I was sure, like I am sure that I have fingertips, that I had returned it. But he could not be moved, and I was sentenced to indefinite lunch detention until I either returned the book or paid the $16 to replace it. I left the office late for first period, defeated, but kept my head held high at lunch later that day as I walked past the entirety of cafeteria, which held a couple hundred of my peers. Plastic food tray in hand, I went down the hall shop classroom that had since been moved and the awaiting detention. I checked in with Mrs. Brown at her desk in front and took an inconspicuous seat in the back. Staring down at my canned peach slices, I braced for the worst. A murderous ruckus were going to break out any minute, I could tell. But once my ears stopped ringing, I discovered that it was really a calm escape from the crowded and rowdy lunchroom. I ate slowly that day, enjoyed my young thoughts in blissful quiet, and wondered what kind of heaven was this. To be fair, I did search far and wide for that book that first day. Attempts to find it in my locker, bedroom, and backpack were fruitless, and the general consensus in my home was that the school was being ridiculous. I certainly wasn't going to pay for something I didn't lose. So the next day, considering my brief brush with the law and the invisible stain already attached to my reputation, I went armed with a book and my lunch past the maddening crowds to the detention room. I sat there day after day for nearly 2 months of lunches. In retrospect, to this day, those remain some of the most relaxing lunch breaks of my life. I had around 40 solid minutes to recharge in, mostly complete silence with my reasonably priced lunch and whatever book I was currently reading. I had to recount my origin story a few times, since no one could figure out how the quiet bookworm of a girl who had never been in trouble before had lands of detention, but I was mostly left to my own devices in this newly found peaceful retreat. I was friendly with Mrs. Brown, who had worked for the district of my small town since I was in elementary school, and even hooked her up with a sweet horse whisper poster that she loved from my family's mom and pop video store. She must have felt bad for me, because somewhere around the 1-month mark she started up a collection to cover the cost of the book. She added the initial donation, but teachers who would stop by to chit-chat would add loose change to it, and race to buy my freedom was on. After a few weeks, she handed me just under $7. My love of solitude was no match for the guilt of carrying around that money or my mom, who had just started a new job in the school district. So with a heavy heart I paid in full for the missing book and went back to my old lunch table in the thick of the action. Months later, during the last week of school, I was called down to the library at my convenience, and with sweaty palms forced myself to face the mosaic over what was inevitably going to be yet another overdue book at the end of the day. Well, lo and behold, the end-of-year inventory check had located the book as waylaid in the wrong section of the library. I received a few sheepish looks from the librarians as they refunded the money and apologized in a backward way that still made me the bad guy, as overdue books are the real blemish on one's character. So how were they to assume that I didn't lose the book? Remember my mom's new job in the school? Well, she just happened to be walking by the library just as I was finishing up, and to say that she laid into them is far too extreme sounding. But she did scold some stern-faced librarians into giving me a proper apology. She also demanded that they look into reforming their system and, my favorite part, take the proper measures to expunge my record. She was very concerned about me carrying around the albatross of false accusation, apparently. And just like that, my life of crime was over. Till Dirk got lunch detention thanks to a missing library book. Discovered I loved it, intended to sit there the rest of my high school career until the teacher running detention took up a collection to get me out. Book was found in the library, and my mom chastised women who were likely as old as time itself. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, smash the bell, and whatever else our YouTube overlords require nowadays.